Hello guys, and welcome to our front-end web development course. In this class, we are going to be talking about CSS selectors. My name is Damilare from Rice Academy. We have several selectors, and the first one I want to talk about, or we have several selector categories. The first one I want to talk about are the simple selectors. So when we say simple selectors, I'm talking about selectors using the name of an element, the ID of an element, or the class that an element belongs to. Now, looking at these 6 paragraphs that we have in our HTML document, you would realize that they all are represented by the element P, the paragraph element or the tag P. So we could simply come here and use the name of the element to style all these 6 paragraphs. P, open and closing curly brace, and whatever style we put here would affect all of them. Let's go. Let's have width. Let's just say 10 pixels. Height 20 pixels. Then background color, let's say red. Which should be, let's say 100%. Sorry. Now you would see that by using just the name of the paragraph element, we're able to target all these 6 paragraphs and style them accordingly. This is named selectors. Another thing we want to consider is ID selectors. Let's proceed and give the first paragraph an ID and call it first. I want you to take note that every element can, an ID can only refer to one element. And what that simply means is if you would want to give all of them IDs, they have to be differently named. So the first one, let's give it an ID of first, and the third one, let's give it an ID of third. Then we save. I can now come here and target the first paragraph using the pound symbol and the ID name. Hashtag first, and then this time around I want to check the background color to green. Now you see that I was able to target just the first element by using its ID. I can do the same by targeting the third element. Background color again. Then I say blue. Yeah, I could say color of the text white. Same here, color white. Beautiful. These are simple selectors. Let's proceed to combinator selectors. And here we are going to be selecting elements based on the relationship between them. There is something we are missing out yet. Yeah, we've not talked about the class selectors under simple selectors. Let's assume these last 3 guys belong to the same class. So we're going to give it a class and say lasts, which means the last 3, or let's even say last 3 belongs to a class called last 3. Then I come here, I put the other 2 paragraphs in the same class. So these 3 guys are in a class called last 3. To style a class of elements, we use the dots, and then dots last 3 -3, open and closing curly braces. This time around we say background color would be, should we try yellow? Let's try black. And then color would be white. Let's go. Now, these are simple selectors. We've selected using the name of the element, using the ID, and using the class that they belong to. Let's move on to combinator selectors. So combinator selectors, we have a few things we're going to be considering. The first is when you use a comma and when you don't use a comma. So let's assume that I want to give the same style to the first and the third element. I could style them using the same CSS style line without having to write it separately. For example, I could have done hashtag first, right? Background color red, then color white. Then I come again and I do hashtag third, background color red, color white. Instead of doing this and repeating myself twice, I could easily have come here and write pound symbol, hashtag first, take note, comma, hashtag third. What I'm saying is this element that I've targeted and also this element I've targeted, assign all these styles to them. Can you see? Let me first of all remove this so that you understand. At first, it was just the first paragraph. Then when I added a comma and the third element was targeted, I now have the first and the third having these styles as their style. That is using the comma in combinator selector. Then there is the no comma. The no comma selector, please take note, when there is no comma, there's just a space. So when you have a space between two elements, you are saying target any descendant of the first element. Take a look at this. We have a div element, and then we close the div. We have a paragraph tag inside that div. I am a paragraph, and then we close it. We have another div. Please just take note of what I'm doing. Then we have another paragraph, another p element. Then we close this. Now, this is the parent, right? This p tag is a descendant. And it is also a direct child of that div, right? Direct child of this div. This div is also a direct child of this div. And this p tag is also another p descendant. Now, this might look confusing. Let me explain. When I have a selector that says a selector that says div space, take note, div space p, and I have my opening brace and closing brace. I am saying look for any p that is a descendant of a div element, whether a direct child or a grandchild, it does not matter to me. So let's go back here. When I do a div space p, I am saying please help me target this p, also help me target this p. Is that clear? Now let's go back to our VS Code. So let's assume I have a div here now that is a parent. I have this p element as a child inside it. I have another div again that is a child, but that has another p inside of it. Are you seeing this? Let's have something else. I'm just thinking, what else can we have? I still have another div here, yeah, with another div that has a p inside. I am a grandchild, and then we have another div that has a p that says I am a great grandchild. I'm a great grandchild. Now let's style every p that is a descendant. Take note, not a direct child. That means it can be a child, it can be a grandchild, it can be a great grandchild. As long as it's within a div, we want to target all the p's. So what this one is saying is target all p elements that are descendants of a div element, and then we give it a background color of green, and then color of white. Let's take this out first. Now, as you can see, let's look at it together. The first paragraph is a descendant of this div, so it is a direct child of this div. This guy, let's just give it an ID. Let's say ID grand. Let's give this one ID great. You can give it any name you want. Now, take note of something. The paragraph element with ID first was targeted. The other one with ID second, or not ID second grand or something. This guy with ID second grand was also targeted, and the second grand, as you can see. This other one with ID grand that says I am a grandchild was targeted because it is a descendant of div. Whether this div or this div, it does not matter. As long as it's a descendant of a div element, it would be targeted. Let's even change this to another element that is not a div. I'm looking for another element we can use. Can someone help me? Okay, let's just try section. Just something different, so that you would see what I'm trying to say. Now, you see that this guy is still targeted, even though it is a child of section, but this section is a child of div. As long as it can trace its roots or its ancestry to a div as a parent or a forefather or a great forefather or great forefather, or maybe the great grandfather was taken as a slave to another country, but you can trace its roots to that guy that is called a div, it will be targeted. Even this guy would be targeted. But you see, these four guys would not be targeted because they do not have a parent that has that ancestry called div as an element. The parent of these guys, for example, is body element, and body is HTML. Nothing that has to do with div. This is how to target all elements that are descendants of another element. One other thing I want to talk about is the combinator CSS. So let's assume that I have multiple elements with the same class, and for whatever reason this guy is in class parent, So I have a paragraph in this class. I have, you know, in the same class you'd have girls, boys, and a whole lot of other people. I have a section in this class. Yeah, that's fine. I could target all the divs in that class by saying div, take notes, because it's not very hard to target this guy and this guy. If I use the class parent, it will target, if I use the class parent, it will target everybody here. And I don't want to target everybody, I only want to target the div that is in this class parent. Then I'm going to have div. Take note, there is no space, there is no comma. It has to be together, div dot parent. This is saying I want to target the div that is in class parent. That means that div must have, that means that element must fulfill these two conditions. It must be a div element and it must have a class parent. Did you take note? It must be a div element and it must have a class parent. I say it again, it must be a div element and it must have a class parent. If you use only dot parent, every guy here will be targeted. But if you use div.parent, only the first and the last guy here in this class will be targeted. Let me drive on my point. Let me start with .parent, and I come here and I say background color is purple, and I say color is white. All the elements in with the class parents have been targeted. But I did not want to target this P element. I did not want to target this section element. So what should I do again? Sorry. This is also section element. What should I do differently? I'll add div here. Take note again, there is no comma and there is no space. Comma is to say I want to target div and then elements with .parent class. But when they are together, I am saying I want to target a div that is in a class called parent. Now I have this, and then I'm only targeting the first div with class parent and the last div with class parent. Another combinator selector we want to consider is the child selector. Now we've considered the descendant selector. We also need to consider the child selector. Now look at this. I now do div. Child, you use the greater than sign. That means this first one is greater than, directly greater than the second one. And I say every P element targets every P element that is a direct child of a div element. It might not be a direct descendant. It might not be, it must be a direct child rather, but not a grandchild or great grandchild. So we said we want to target every P, and you should expect that it will target this one with ID first. It will target this one with ID second. It will not target this one. Do you know why? The parent is section. It will target this one with ID grade. So can we go now? Let's say background color black. Oh, is there anything like GVG black, right? Black and color white. Now, what has happened here, guys? It targeted this guy that is a direct child. So if we have multiple direct child, we can say first direct child, have another P here. I am the second direct child, and call the ID second direct. Sorry. Now you would see that the second direct child was also targeted because look at it. This is the parent here, the div, this div. This guy too was targeted because this is his parent. But this P guy was not targeted because his parent is a section. This guy was targeted because his parent is a section. This guy is not concerned about his about his great-great-grandparents, about his forefathers. It's just the question is, who is your daddy? If your daddy is div, then you're good. All right, another combinator selector we want to consider is the adjacent selector. Adjacent talks about neighbors. So let's do div, and p. Yeah, I would need you to please take note of what is happening here. To use the adjacent selector, use the plus. And target all neighbors. All direct neighbors. So for example, at the moment I live in a 6 tenant flat. If you allow me to call it that, that means we are 6, and we have 2 flats on the ground floor, 2 flats on the first floor, 2 flats on the second floor. I live on the second floor, and my direct neighbor is the guy living in flat 5 while I live in flat 6. So if I'm to target all my direct neighbors, I'll be targeting the guy in flat 5 and not the guy in flat 2. To do that, we use the plus selector. What I'm saying is target all direct neighbors of the div element downwards. So you get neighbors downwards in HTML. What that means is I will check for div, then check below it. Does that make sense? So you are checking for all direct neighbors of the div elements below it. Take note, direct neighbors. What does that mean? I'll be picking this. No, sorry. I'll be picking this. Take note, this guy here is a direct neighbor to this guy on line 15 to 17. This guy on line 18. This guy is not a direct neighbor, it's above it. You would see. Then I can see another div here. This guy, I am the third paragraph, would also be selected. Can we try? Okay, so we are doing background color magenta. If you need to pause this video to absorb it in, please do. Then color, let's make the color black. Be black. Now take note, we are only targeting 2 elements. Do you know why? It is only this guy on line 18. I am the second direct child. Can you see? That is a direct neighbor to this div element. It's also this guy on line 30 that is a direct neighbor to this div element on line 20. Take note. But let's now make it more complicated. Let's target all neighbors, not just the direct neighbors. So we say we are targeting div to target all immediate general siblings that I call neighbor. They're like immediate. Take note, after. Sibling is after. So when you are using plus or the tilde selector, you are selecting anything after the first element, and in our case that's the div. So we are saying div p. Now look at who will be selected. Line 18, this guy on line 18 will be selected. This guy on line 30, 31, 32, 33, because they are all adjacent, general adjacent siblings to this div guy. This is the only sibling, adjacent sibling to this div guy. If there are more p tags after it, it will be selected. But take note, it must not be a descendant, it must be a direct sibling. Now let's go. Let's say background color background color up. I think I've exhausted all the colors in my head. What have you observed? Second guy here, ID with second direct, or ID of second direct was selected. Third was selected. Fourth, fifth, sixth, they were all selected, because using the tilde selector we are saying select every p that is a neighbor to a div element that comes below it, as long as it's a p, and when you look up you find a div, please select it. All right. If I put, now look at something, let me make it a bit more complex. If I put, let's say, another paragraph here, let's just call it an anchor tag, or another element, and I say I am an anchor, and then I save. You can see that it's still targeting this, because this is still a direct sibling to that. Can you see that? All right. Another selector, combinator selector, would want to check out is the attribute selectors. I think we are done with combinator selectors. Before we move to attribute selectors, I think we should check pseudo classes. Yes, beautiful. Should we clean all this off? Yes, I think we should. Pseudo class selector. Pseudo class selectors will select an element based on its state. There are several elements that have state. For example, over is a state. When you move your mouse over an element like this, a state is triggered. When you click on it, a state is triggered. And a whole lot of states are available in CSS. So let's consider a few, a few selectors. And this is the way to write a CSS pseudo class selector. Let me quickly show you. You have the selector, then you have the colon pseudo class. So your pseudo class here could be over, visited, etc. Now, let's start with our div element here. Let's call this div, let's give it an ID of parent. Say I am a div that has a state. I am a div that has a state. Now, I go to this guy that is called the parent. I first of all use the selector. That's the pound symbol, parent. Then the colon, the pseudo class. So we have several pseudo classes, and the one I want to check now is the over. There are several pseudo classes you can use. Over. Open and close curly braces, and then I say background color. Color would be red, then color would be white. So let's give it a default background color when it is not overed. So you see that I selected it without the pseudo class. So I say background color black, then color white. Let's just give it some width and height. No, height. Pixels. Okay. Now, sorry, I changed my mind. Now, this is what happens. Take note, as I move my cursor and I hover on this div, what happens? The background color changes to red. Every element has states that are triggered when a user performs some actions. When you move your mouse over any HTML element, the over state is triggered. And if you define any style based on that state, it will pick it up and assign that style to that particular element on that state. So now, can you see? Let's use the anchor tag for more reference. So we have a link that can be visited. If you remember your HTML, your anchor tag would have an attribute called href, and your href can lead to now when you use your anchor tag, now I want to use the name of the tag to style it, to select and style it. So we say anchor dot, if it has been visited. I think there is a visited pseudo class. Oh my, this is much. Yes, if it has been visited, you should change the text color to brown. So this is a link. By default, the text color is how do I put it now? The text color is blue, but when I visit it and then come back here, sorry, I'm trying to check again. Yeah, to drive this home further, we're going to be using an anchor tag to show how you can visit a link, to show if a link has been visited, if it has not been visited, and several other things. So for example, this anchor tag is selected and the over selector is used, or over pseudo class is used. Now when you take note, you see that if on over, I want the color to be brown. Can you see? If on hover, let me also say text, I think it's text decoration. Text decoration, I should have probably line through. Yeah. So when I over and hit, instead of underline, I now have line through. Probably I'm saying you don't need to visit this link. It's a fake link. Maybe I've checked and I said, oh, this link is a fake link. I can put a text decoration line through on it. Now you can also use pseudo classes for your HTML form input element. Let me quickly create a form. And in my form, I have several input elements. I have one that says name is equal to first name. Sorry. I have another that says, let me just have like 6 of them, last name. I have one that takes in a number, and that one should be age. I just want to make all my input elements, I want them to fall side by side, inputs. Then I just say input display block so that everybody will stay on their own lane. Okay, for my form, let me give it a margin top of 10 pixels, and then each of these forms, let me give them a margin bottom of 10 pixels. Okay, now this is number, this third one is a number. Let me give it a placeholder of age. I'm sure you've already done this in HTML. That's a placeholder of age. and it is, the type is number, sorry, name is age, then the type here, the type of input field is number, okay. So you see, you can still just put in some numbers. Let's say this is a date, date of birth, referral, name is referral, sorry, name is referral. That means the person who referred you to fill this form. Let's put a default value and say the person who brought you here is Rice Academy. We don't want you to be able to change it, so we'll make the field disabled. Disabled means the user cannot change it. Disabled. And then we save it. You'll see that it's showing Rice Academy as the value because we already imputed the value in this input field, but we said it's disabled, it cannot be changed. Then we could give a placeholder for first name. Instead of placeholder here, we could give a label for first name. For first name, F-I. Yeah, you can see that my spelling of first name is not correct, but leave it like that way. First name. So we have a label for first name. We have a label for last name. We don't have a label for others. We don't have a label for others. And then we have our age, we have our date of birth. You can add the type of input for date of birth so that it will show you a date picker, and the type would be date, the date you were born. If you check now, you'd see a picker where you can click and choose a date. And then let's leave these last two. Let's just say the type is submit. Okay, type is a button, sorry. Then the value is equal to submit. Beautiful. We have something good here. Now, let's use our selectors to do a whole lot of magic. The first thing I want to do is, if this input is disabled, so I use the disabled pseudo class. If it's disabled, I can say the background color should be the background color is already gray by default. Let's change it to blue. We go. Whoa. Let me check if the color property would work here. Okay, beautiful. So this is disabled, or maybe we can change it to red, something, I don't know. But this is already disabled. So you'd see that for any input element that is disabled, the background would be red. If I take out this and I had it here, disabled to the last name, it will be red. And take note, once an input field is disabled, you cannot type in it. Okay. Let's check for another pseudo class we can use for input elements. If it's enabled, input enabled, we could have border radius of 5 pixels. I'm sure that would be very much. Yeah, but that way you can see the enabled ones, right? The disabled one, you could even give a border radius of dashed, a border style, sorry, border style of dashed. Then you have something like this. I hope you see it well. I could give it a border radius so that you could see it better, of 5 pixels as well. No, border width, sorry, border width 5 pixels. Can you see the dashed? If I do this for now, you'd see the dash, right? Okay. Let's look for another pseudo class that we can use. If there is a placeholder shown, inputs, if there is a placeholder shown, you know this one has a placeholder, this age has a placeholder, we could give it a font size, let's try that, of 20 pixels. Okay, so only the one with the placeholder shown would the font size be different. Okay, beautiful. That's the font size of the placeholder. Let's use another one that is very important. Let's do the out of range selector, input out of range, and I'll explain what that means. For example, the age here, we can have a minimum and a maximum value. So let's assume we want the minimum to be 18 and the maximum value to be 30. We have a form, and we've been told that only people between the ages of 18 and 30 that can that can apply. When you click on this, you would see that it's starting from 18. When you click down, it's not doing anything, and when you click up all the way up to 30, 30 is your maximum. But if for whatever reason I type in 68, I want it to show that there's a problem. So what can I do? I can do inputs colon out of range, and then that means if I manually type it in, if I use the up and down arrows for this input field, it would not give me anything less than 18 or greater than 30. But if I manually type it in, it would allow. So if the input field is already allowing, I need to show the user that there is a problem, and that is why we're using this out of range pseudo class. So I can do a border color, border color of red, and then I'll do a border style of dashed to show that there is problem. Okay, so let me type in 68 and we'll see what happens. Whoa, now I know there's a problem because it's showing a dashed border style and a border color of red. But if I type in 20, would be fine. That is how to use the out of range pseudo selector. One last thing before we go, let's use the required selector. So first name is required, you had it as one of your attributes. Required. Last name is also required. Oh, sorry, I'm writing this on the inputs in the label. That's a mistake. The last name is also required, and the age is required. I come here, my selector is input. The pseudo class is required. If it's required, I want to give it a box shadow. Let's go. Box shadow of 3 pixels, 3 pixels, 5 pixels, RGBA 200, 200, 200, 0.5. Now take note, all the selected fields, if you check very well, they have a box shadow around them. I wish you could see this better. Do I make this? Let me select something else. Probably that will show it better. Yeah. Can you see all the required fields? First name, last name, age. They are required. How do I know they are required? I use the pseudo class selector to add a box shadow to every field that is required. If I take away this required from this age, what happens? I only have it for first name and last name. If I add it to date of birth, I now have it on my date of birth too. These are required fields. Oh, wow, thank you. The last, or the second to the last selector I want to talk about is the pseudo element selector. So I'll be deleting this. The pseudo element selector. Pseudo element selector. Your pseudo element selector is used to style specified parts of an element. For pseudo class, it's used to style states of an element. You remember those input fields, they had a state, maybe they were required, maybe it was already out of range, maybe it was disabled, a state. And the anchor tag, maybe the link has been visited, maybe you hovered on the link, your normal element, you hover on it, you click on it, a whole lot of things. Now, but for the pseudo element, you have the element already as part of your HTML form or the HTML document. The only thing is we want to style some parts of that element. And let me drive my point home with this simple example. So I have my paragraph element and I want to style the first letter. How do I do that? I would have my selector. Now look at the difference between pseudo element and pseudo class. I have double colon and then the pseudo element. Then your styles will be here. So we come back here and I have my paragraph element that says I am a paragraph element. Now I want to style the first line of this paragraph. How do I make this very much? Okay. Okay, beautiful. Now to start the first line of this element, I can easily come here and use the P tag, double colon, and then use the first, can you see, first line, pseudo element selector. Then I come here and I say background color red. Come here, I say text decoration. Text decoration line through, and then I say color white. What did you observe? So let's assume I have 3 of such elements or 5 of such elements. Go 1, 2, 3, 4. Every first line of these selectors or of these elements have a background color of red, a text decoration of line through, and a color of white. Let's use another pseudo element selector. We're not going to be doing so much here. Let's have a P again. This time around we have the first letter. Take note, the first letter and not the first line. Then we could say we want it to always let's give it a background color of, I'm really thinking, okay, background color of green, and then a color of black. Let's give it some space, width 200 pixels. Okay, I'm not sure which is gonna work here. Let's just give it a color of, let's give these guys a color of black and give it a color of white. Okay, so you can see that we've been able to style the first letter. So if for example someone types in something, you can easily just change the first letter to uppercase. Let me quickly check the CSS property to change up to uppercase. CSS uppercase. Okay, so text transform uppercase. So let's assume we used a small letter here and say you am a paragraph, we am a paragraph, they am a paragraph, us am a paragraph. We save. Now each of you can see that this paragraph started with a small letter. What if we want to change the first letter to capital? We can easily use text transform, and then we'll have uppercase. In fact, the first line, we could also do a text transform and change everything to uppercase. Okay, beautiful. I think this is all I'll be doing on pseudo elements. If you have several other things, you can let me know. Yeah, the next pseudo element selector I want to talk about is the before and after pseudo element selector. And lastly, I will be talking about the selection element, and that will be all for now. So let me have this paragraph element that says I should have been a cat. Then I save. So I have one that says I should have been a cat, and then I can have a before selector here. That says, let me give it an ID. Now take note of this. It's only this paragraph I want to target. If I use the P element, it's going to affect everybody, and that's not what I want. So I give it an ID. I call it cats. Come here, and then I say P. I could easily just say ID cats. I could also say the paragraph that is of ID cat, but that's not needed. I come here, and then I use my double colon. I do after. Can you see the after pseudo element selector? My opening and closing curly brace. Now, because I have the after, there is something I need to show you here. There is a content property that I would use, and then I will put whatever I want to add, even if it's an image, as a content after that paragraph. Look at what happens. Images. I have a cat picture in my images folder. Come images / cat.png. Then I save. Can you see? After this particular paragraph, ID cat that says I should have been a cat, I have this cat picture. I could also have it before. Can you see? Before and after. One last thing I want to show you is for every paragraph, let me not use paragraph. Let me use a div. Yeah, a div. And then I have a selection pseudo element. Selection. Look at what happens when I use the selection pseudo element on the div. Selection pseudo element here on this div tag. I say background color yellow, and then color whites. I could do background color black. Let's see. Now, what happens when I select any element here? Oh, sorry, this is not a div. So let me create a div now. Say div. I am a div element. Kindly select any text within my borders. Now, when I select any of these texts, see what happens? The background becomes black, the color becomes white. I can change this to yellow, the color becomes red. We'll go again. Kindly select any text within my borders. There are a lot of things you can do with CSS, and I would advise you to go through pseudo classes, pseudo elements, and several other selectors. Okay, let's talk about the attribute selector. And to select an element using its attribute, you can easily just do an opening and a close bracket, the attribute, and then the operator, which can be equal to, or some other things that we'll consider, and then the value. You close the brackets, open a curly brace, close the curly brace, and put the styles between those braces. Now let's go to VS Code to check further what we mean. Yep, we have this form with this input that has a text input, first name, last name, a type number, date, and several other things. To target every element with a type attribute, you could just have open close bracket and have type in between, then you open and you close your curly braces. Background color here, you could say green, and then color, you could say white. Now you take note that every input element that has a type, whether the type is text, can you see this, or the type is a number, or the type is a date, does not matter. Whatever type it is, it will select all of them and give them a background color of green and then a color of white. Can you see I'm putting in my name now, and I have this. We could make it better and add an input as the element so that we know that it's just targeting only input element that has a type. That is fine. We could also proceed to say input elements that have a type that is text. So if there is one that has a type that is text number, it would not select it. If there is one that has a type that is date, it will not select it. If there is one that has a type that is button, it will not select it. We just select the first, second, and this one on line 36. You can see first, second, and this other one. That is using the equal to directly. Now, beside this equal to, we could have several other qualifiers. The first qualifier I want to talk about is this tilde. I am now saying, look for an input that has a placeholder. I'm changing it now. That has a placeholder. So this first input that has first name has a placeholder called first name, and you can see the placeholder here, right? For now, let me take away this. Let me just hide it. You can see the placeholder here as first name, right? The placeholder has placeholder for last name as last name. We could also have another one that says placeholder is nickname. Okay, we have three input elements with placeholders. We could say, please look for an input element with placeholder. Tilde equal to is saying the placeholder contains this word called text. Now, you would see that none of them contains the word called text, so it's not selecting any element. But let's change it to contains the word called name. Contains the word name. What happens? It selects the first one and the second one because first name contains name as a word, last name contains name as a word. Let's move ahead to now check the caret. And please just follow me. The caret qualifier for your attribute selector is saying that it starts with a substring. So you could have had, I'm trying to make it better. Parently. Okay, I'll do something interesting here now. Okay, so we are saying that starts with first. Now look at this. That starts with first. The placeholder starts with first, so it's going to pick this. If you're saying placeholder starts with FIRS, no T, can you see it's still picking this? Can you see? It's not picking anything. Okay. The other one we want to consider is the pipe qualifier. Can you see? We are saying it starts with a word. It has to be a word. So for example, if I do this, it will not select the first one. Can you see? Because this is not a full word. If it were to be the caret like before, it will select the first one. But this is saying it has to be a full word. So it has to be a full word, and it has to be first. Or it could also select it if it is dash name. So it would select it if it starts with a word or a word with an hyphen. Can I explain this again, please? If it starts with first as a word, it will be selected. If it starts with first dash hyphen, first name class, it will still be selected. That is if it is the pipe operator. But if it is the caret, it must be the exact word. It must be a substring rather. So it will still select FIRS. But if it is pipe, it will not select. Okay, the next one to consider is the dollar. You're saying if it ends with, let's say name, if it ends with a word called name, select this and this. Now take note, it's not selecting the first name class because it does not end with name, it ends with class. But this ends with name, this also ends with name, nickname. Can you see? So it's selecting this and this. And the last attribute selector I want to show you is the star. It says if it contains any string at all that looks like this. So if I have star, you'll see that it will select first, last, and nickname. Let's go. It's just looking for NAME anywhere. NAME. In fact, if you do NAM, it will still select them. If you do NA, it will still select them as long as it is there. But if you do N, it will still select. So this is just saying I just need this word to be part of any word at all. But for the pipe, it's saying I need it to be a word or a word with an hyphen. And this one is saying I only need it to start as a substring. It's similar to the star, but it's saying I want to start. This is saying I want to end. And then this is saying this star, the dollar is saying I want to end. The caret is saying I want to start. The star is saying I can be anywhere within the string. Does this make sense? Let me explain again. The caret is saying I have to start with this substring. The dollar is saying I need to end with this substring. The star is saying I can be anywhere, I don't mind, whether first, middle, or last. And the pipe is saying I need to start with this word. It has to be a word, not a substring, not part of a string, or I have to be a word with an hyphen after me. So to wrap up, let's go over all of them again. We say the tilde operator must have a complete word called name in its placeholder. You could see this is not a complete word. It's a compound word. It has an hyphen, so it fails that particular test. This has complete word, name. This is part of another word. This is a substring, so it will only select the second one. That is for the tilde. For the caret, we say it must start with a substring. So if you do this, it will not select any. But if you change it to, let's say, NIC, it will pick the third one, that is nickname, starting with a substring. If you use the pipe, you're saying it must start with a word, or the word must have an hyphen following it. And if you check first, because first has an hyphen following it, it will pick it up. But if you change this to FIRS without T, it will not select it. It must select this whole word or the whole word with an hyphen. If you now say I want it to be FIRS also, it will select the first one. Then the dollar is saying it must end with that word. So we'll go again and I say end with name. it will select this. So it will end with whether it's a substring or a full word. Can you see? It doesn't matter whether it's substring or a full word, it must end with this. And the substring, just like the tilde has to be word, but for substring, for star, it can be anywhere within a word as a word. It does not matter. So if we use name, it's going to pick the three of them. Thank you and have a great day.